Hello and welcome back to the Perpetual Now. I'm your host, E Sin, and welcome to part 2 of my two-part Tapping the Vein discography review, this time dealing with their sophomore and to-date final album, Another Day Down. For those of you who have not yet checked out part 1, please do so, link in the description down below. And by way of introductions, Tapping the Vein is a Philadelphia-based dark rock / alternative metal band that has been very dear to me since the time that I have discovered them, which was after the fact. By after the fact, I mean long after the release of their 2009 sophomore album, the one that I'm going to be reviewing and talking about, Another Day Down. Now, between the band's first full length, The Damage, and this one, there's a 7-year gap, which is an inordinately long amount of time between albums for any band. But I think for Tapping the Vein, the difference is a little bit more significant because there are no more albums. The band ran into several issues during the production of this one and had to push the release date back a couple times. And the band also, more significantly, split with Nuclear Blast Records. And there is one more pretty significant issue that seems to have plagued this album to the point where the band, having been largely inactive for years, decided to correct almost a decade after the release of this. And that particular issue is in the album's mastering, in that while the mix was adequate enough, the master job, for whatever reason, has resulted in the album sounding way too quiet. And by too quiet, I don't mean that this wasn't brick-walled and the volume was cranked up to 11. I mean that it is so quiet that you often had to turn whatever sound system were on way up in order to just adequately hear what was going on. Add to that the sort of okay but still a little muddy mix and complete lack of three-dimensionality in the master. Another Day Down could have fallen flat on the basis of its bad production alone. Now, for those of you who have been watching me for some time, I do bitch about production a lot when it comes to it. There is something about albums having the right kind of production that appeals to me, subject on which I really have to make a video one of these days. But the thing is, with Tapping the Vein, the bad production job does little to hinder the type of beauty that is hidden within the band's music, in that I loved this album even with that horrible, depressingly quiet mastering job that the band themselves hated. Years after the release of this album, the band managed to acquire the stems for their songs and got the entire album remastered and therefore re-released. The things that I'm going to be talking about with regards to the music will be based by and large on the remastered version. However, there is a very significant difference between the remastered version and the version that I had purchased and initially listened to, and it is in the arrangement of the track list. But the review that I'm going to be making will be following the original arrangement of the track list that starts with the track Burn. The sound of Tapping the Vein has always been grounded firmly in the late 90s, early 2000s post-grunge, with their more varied, almost bordering on jazzy drums, the guitars playing an almost secondary role, with electronic elements being mixed in with enough subtlety to sort of make them blend and act more as a filler for the little cracks in between sounds rather than overwhelming the sound. And as I mentioned, electronic elements not meaning that you have to end up sounding like fucking Imagine Dragons. That was more or less the shape and size of what you could expect from their first album, The Damage, in that even when guitars came to the forefront, they were used more for building atmosphere. This is sort of not the case in Another Day Down, because there are tracks on here that are far more guitar driven and far more aggressive in terms of their sound. Songs like Complicated and I Don't Feel have more varied guitar riffs that are put front and center, and they are used to drive the song forward rather than to embellish it in any way. Now, this does not mean that the band does not retain most of their softer elements, in particular the more dissonantly toned, reverb-rich, softer guitar tones that were used to maximum effect in their previous album. They are alive and well, and let me tell you this, they are used to even greater effect on Another Day Down. Songs like the opening track Burn, Parts of Party Favors, or completely depression laden tracks like Razor Blades or Clean are marked more with the presence of these softer guitars playing these incredibly sad, incredibly emotional, and anguished little riffs carry you away into a bad place where nothing good happens and the sun just does not come up. Speaking of which, the atmosphere of Another Day Down, impressively enough, is even more depressing than its predecessor, in that if The Damage had these more vicious, more powerful moments, Another Day Down is entirely powerless. Conceptual themes of Another Day Down do not stray that far from the band's usual playhouse, in that the main themes featured in this album are inability of forming emotional connections, but this one has been downplayed quite significantly and almost replaced completely by the almost overbearing presence of self mutilation, self loathing, and suicidal ideation themes. A cursory look at the track list and a basic skimming through lyrics reveal the songs Clean, Razor Blades, I Don't Feel, Inclined. These are the songs that deal with the idea of one killing oneself, with Clean literally starting with the words, I am standing on this platform. The whole song plays out like someone standing in a high place contemplating what would happen if they jump and whether or not they should. And this is dealt with in a way that is completely distant from trying to make art of it. The lyrics have actually taken a little bit of a turn here, in that despite being a lot simpler than the first album, despite being a lot more blunt, they are also kind of sinisterly loving, in that there is, or there seems to be, this undertone of not only acceptance but having fun with the feelings that have inspired the songs. Things like a rope tied to hang oneself being mentioned as being a lovely bow in Another Day Down, in the almost childish way the song Razor Blades presents the act of cutting oneself with razor blades, especially with the repeated lines, I am sad today, I wanna play. The thing that was striking about Tapping the Veins lyrics and Heather Thompson's extremely profound delivery of them has always been the rather artless rendition of the issues that are being covered. Sure, there is room for some obfuscation, as Heather Thompson has repeatedly stated that these are not her own experiences per se. So, in order to ground them in a sort of personality free context, the general context, there is some obfuscation that is being done, which does not in any way take away from the more honesty of the expressions that are being brought forward, the genuinity of the situation, and or the things that this person is going through is presented in a way that doesn't leave much room for interpretation, nor does it concern itself with more colorful verbiage. If there is something that is to be said, it is said with as much bluntness as can be integrated into music like this. I mean, take the song Razor Blades, for instance. This is a song about someone cutting themselves, and it just starts with, I am sad today, I want to play with my razor blades. Like, it doesn't get more honest and more blatant than this. The narrative elements that had colored the previous album are present here, but less obvious in this case. What I can tell you is that in terms of mood and progression of songs, the album is just one downhill slide. There are no hope spots, there are no ups, it's all just down. It starts right off the bat with Burn, which is sort of professing a sort of apathy and or a desensitization to abuse, and it just gets worse from there. All this, of course, is brought to life by the unrestrained, anguished, and completely immersive vocal performances by Heather Thompson once again. She sings her soul out, and not only does she do that, but she actually manages to reach into you and touch your soul with the way that she delivers these lyrics. Combined with her extremely powerful screaming vocals and her softer, more hushed tones, it just makes for one painful experience for the listener, first and foremost, and then for whoever this story is happening to. The sense of realism that takes over all these tracks is apparent and as in your face as can be. And furthermore, Another Day Down does something that The Damage for the most part did not, and it uses a lot of vocal harmonies to enhance the way that the lyrics are delivered to you. You know, the emotional impact of songs like Razor Blades or Burn or Clean or Time or All My Heart are actually enhanced far more than they would have been if Heather Thompson was just singing. The vocal harmonies sort of elevate these songs to the level of sheer blunt force trauma inflicted upon your feelings whenever you hear them. The bitter acceptance of I don't feel, or the sort of sadder, more resigned feelings of Bury Me Somewhere with a Breeze. Like, all this is just overwhelming in terms of how deep it cuts. Especially if you're like me, who have in the past dealt with suicidal ideation, have attempted suicide, have had experiences with self-harm. This can be borderline triggering stuff. That is just how powerful this is. It really doesn't help that the album comes to a close with the almost ballad-like, extremely soft-spoken, extremely gentle song Inclined, which, let me read it to you. I have nothing, I'm not recovering. I'm biding time left because when I'm so inclined, when I have the strength to, I will throw myself into the sea. Which is sort of why I kind of have difficulty recommending this album all willy-nilly, because if you are on the verge, if you are in the middle of a crisis and you resort to music and this is the album you pick, the results may not be the best for you. And if you are in such a situation, one, you are not alone. Two, please get help. But the essence of Tapping the Vein has always, at least for me, been the sort of agonizing beauty found in such dark corners of the self, basically, in your experience. And portraying that in such an honest, in such a genuine way is actually a lot harder than it appears. You can't just throw in goth tinted instrumentation and powerful vocals to goth poetry style lyrics and call it a day. You have to watch out that you pay a certain amount of respect to the experience that is being conveyed, which is what Another Day Down succeeds in doing. And this is the main reason why I hold this album to such high esteem, which I do. It is one of my favorites of all time. And all in all, I think if you are open to such an experience, if you are not listening to music to just hear technical prowess, if you want emotional depth to the things that you're listening to, or if you want to hear what actual depths of despair, hopelessness, and depression sound like, I would definitely recommend this album. I would also recommend The Damage, mind, but Another Day Down is something special. After Another Day Down, the band has yet to release another album. Heather Thompson has made some appearances in Paradise Lost albums of recent years, and the band has made an update, I think 2 years ago or something, on their Facebook, which had a picture of them in a rehearsal space and had the caption "Dusting Off the Cobwebs," but nothing really came of it. So I think for now, even though there is no official word on whether or not Tapping the Vein has split, this is about all that we can expect from them, which I think is really sad, because at the end of the day, I believe that Tapping the Vein deserved far more recognition, deserved far more accolades, and a far larger fan base than the one that they have now. Which is also kind of the reason why I wanted to make these reviews, because I wanted to do whatever little I could do in order to raise their profile, because I really do believe that their music is well worth hearing. Just if you're gonna hear this one, hear the remastered version. In terms of sound, it is really better, but I would advise you to rearrange the track list. Yeah, so I think I'm just going to go now and have a listen to Another Day Down once more. Until next time, this is Eason. Peace out.
Stay safe, stay sane. And if you like my content, please subscribe. I said now.